ALFRED WEBRE is the originator of the term exopolitics, for those of you that don't know that. And he's actually a futurist. He's an amazing thinker. He was in this field doing things and thinking things before most people had any idea, even in ufology, how to really think about this whole concept that we are not alone in the universe. And so I just want to give kudos to him and really honor him for that. He's also been, how do I put this? He's undergone heavy-duty surveillance and other kinds of things. He is Canadian, but obviously he was on the target list for the powers that be for quite a long time. And actually he's had to weather all kinds of stuff that he doesn't even talk about. I know this because of my intuitive ability, but also because I followed his work actually long before Camelot.
Yeah, sure.
So I just want to really honor him for that. Other than that, I think that we could just give him maybe the microphone and let him
Sure.
begin to talk about, because he's very knowledgeable in so many ways. Are you hooked up here with this? Does this?
Yes. Am I? Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much, Carrie. And I want to thank Project Camelot, who are really providing, I think, in my humble opinion, a leading edge, if not the leading edge platform for whistleblowers to come forth on the issues that will create a positive future for us. And on that note, that's the note that I'll be sharing with you in a PowerPoint on Solar Cycle 24. And Solar Cycle 24 is the one that's just starting now, where it's 2009 to 2020. And by 2020, we'll be roughly into the beginnings of a golden age. So I know that it's very hard to go from the problem statement to a golden age, but that's roughly the process that we're in now. If we look at Solar Cycle 24, which we'll be seeing all the graphs and pictures of.
This is working. We're very close now.
Yeah. The solar maximum will be in 2012 to 2013. Specifically, some say in May of 2013. What that means, and we'll share some of this, is that there's the index of human excitability, which has been plotted by a Russian scientist going back to 500 BC. And what he's plotted is that about 80% of the revolutions, the wars, and the breakthroughs in human society at the collective level happen at the solar maximum. So
okay, you're online here, and let's make sure that you know how to use this computer.
Oh, good.
I guess you got a down arrow. Does that work? No.
Yeah, probably. Let's see. Oh wait, I've got to get on. I've got to get on.
Oh, yeah, the down arrow is working. It was just slow.
Oh, sorry.
So let's go back up.
Let's see.
Is that? No, that's not it.
Okay, good.
There we are at the
Great.
beginning. So this is up, down arrows right there.
Okay.
That will work. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. Well, as we were saying, this presentation, and there are about 60 slides here, so I'll tend to go through them on a relatively quick basis. Following the trend from 2009 to 2020, and we'll be going kind of on a macrocosmic scale on much of this. That's a picture of our own galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and we'll also be getting into the axis of which is a galactic center black hole at the center of our galaxy. And now it turns out that science is discovering, as you might have suspected, a universal axis. Not only a galactic axis, but a universal axis. So the synchrony that we're going through now is occurring not only at the individual level, at the planetary level, at the solar level, at the galactic level, but at the universal level. So it's not only just us here, it's huge. And the universe is really the source of our thoughts. We think that we have private thoughts, but it's coming at the galactic level and at the universal level. So one message for that is relax and enjoy it. Now, let's see if oh good. We'll be covering Solar Cycle 24, which is a perfect storm, the galactic alignment, exopolitics, and the time acceleration matrix. Time is actually accelerating as we speak, as we sit here, and because time is not a constant. And exopolitics is the new political science of outer space. It's a science of relations between our human civilization and other civilizations in the multiverse. We'll be talking about positive outcomes of Solar Cycle 24 and strategies and solutions. So, well, welcome to Solar Cycle 24, 2009 to 2020. There are many predictions of what the amplitude of Solar Cycle 24 will be. As you can see from this graph by NASA. And some think that it's going to be very low amplitude, and some think that it's going to be very high amplitude. So we're in a position of maximal uncertainty now. And although some information about Solar Cycle 25 is coming in, most of the predictions are only within this cycle, that is from 2009 to 2020. And so I like focusing, amongst many other reasons, on Solar Cycle 24, 2009 to 2020, because it gets us out of the 2012 mean. And it says, hey, it's a cycle. Okay. Oops, I guess that's going forward. Right now, we're in a deep solar minimum, and there's about a 50-year low in solar wind pressure. What this means is that there will be fewer geomagnetic storms that theoretically can affect all of the computer equipment and satellites and other things that we have here on Earth. We continue to be in a deep solar minimum, and the sun's brightness is dropping. We're in the deepest solar minimum in nearly a century. Sunspot magnetism, which you can see plotted there on the graph, is on the decline. And it may be that sunspots will be increasing because we're in such uncertainty. You can remember seeing from the graph at the beginning that sunspot cycles may be picking up by the end of 2009, to be followed by a solar maximum of below average intensity in 2012 or 2013. However, there's another view of this, and that is that if the sun continues to become more quiet, we'll be going into a territory of historic minimum. And a quiet sun will cause temperatures globally to take a nosedive. This is contrary to the global warming argument. So we're in a period of maximum uncertainty. If this version is coming forward, which there's some basis for it, temperatures are actually falling around the globe, not getting warmer. And we know already that from 1998, the lower troposphere temperatures globally have fallen around 0.5 degrees Celsius due to the quiet sun. So it's necessary to go deeper than the global warming headlines to really understand the dynamics. However, if we do have a Dalton minimum or a Maunder minimum, which are referred to historically low sun minima, the main effect will be to have famine and starvation worldwide due to shortened growing seasons and harsher weather. And so we may be headed into what's called a mini ice age. And we don't know. And we're in 2009. So that's the degree of uncertainty. It's the principle, the more you know, the more you don't know. So some of the evidence is that solar cycle 25, which will be peaking around 2022, it starts in 2020, could be one of the weakest in solar cycles in centuries, and that's connected to a possible mini ice age. And that's because the conveyor belt system on the suns is beginning to weaken. Now, in the midst of all this, we have a National Academy of Sciences report from January of '09, which says that 2012 to 13, the solar maximum may actually bring the perfect storm. In other words, solar flares and systems collapse of our current infrastructure around the planet, our energy infrastructure. The National Academy of Sciences report looks at the possibility, if we do have a repetition of the eight-day 1859 Carrington event, a very large solar flare that essentially destroyed the telegraphic system worldwide, which was the electrical system at that time. In the US, the damage could be as high as $2 trillion with millions dead. This is from the report itself. And it's questionable whether the US would ever bounce back. Now, we're talking about 2012 to 2013. Moreover, NASA has now discovered that there's a hole in the Earth's magnetic field which is 10 times as large as was previously thought. The magnetosphere is what protects the Earth from the impact of solar flares. And it could be that plasma from solar flares would up to 20 times the amount of solar plasma could enter the Earth than before. So we have a force multiplier of a solar flare with the hole in the magnetosphere here, looking at the, quote, worst case scenario. We're looking at a solar maximum, which will be around May of 2013. And according to one scientist says, quote, it's the perfect sequence for a very big event if a solar flare should load the magnetosphere with plasma just before a solar storm occurs. We have to remember that we're in a deep solar minimum, which tends to lessen solar storms. So there are all these variables that are occurring at once. This is a map from the National Academy of Sciences study which shows total collapse. The orange areas on both coasts show the total collapse of the electrical grid, and the red are vulnerable transformers. And this is where the estimate of millions dead has come from. Knocking out about 300 key transformers, cutting power to 130 million people. And the coronal mass ejection from the 1859 Carrington event arrived on Earth faster than our early warning system now. China and Europe are equally vulnerable. China's actually installing a high-power electrical grid that is more vulnerable than that of the US. And Europe and the other developed nations will be similarly impacted. What's important is that as far as a reality check, the head of the European Space Agency, Space Weather, says, quote, "This is a fair and balanced report." So that's some of the possibilities. Now, these are the G20 with the Queen. And if we look at the Obama White House website and ask about 2012, 2013, the only thing that is on the website as far as energy policy is that the US wants to ensure that 10% of our electricity comes from renewable sources by 2012. So that's a policy statement, and this is entirely off the radar. So here's a key question. Obviously, if we had smart leadership at the helm of the planet, we would be getting off the grid, and we'd be using some of the non-polluting zero-point non-polluting energy sources such as anti-gravitic technology and, importantly, teleportation technology, which would revolutionize transport on this planet and which are available now on an operational basis in the black budget economy. So the question is, are we being set up to fail and suffer an effective systems collapse if the 2012 to 2013 solar flares materialize? Now, here are some other impacts. The effect of solar cycle 24 on human behavior, and that is that sunspots give up solar flares that increase negative ionization on Earth, and increased negative ionization during sunspot maximum periods increases human excitability and activity. So some of the regularities in studying past solar cycles is that there's a definite tendency for pandemics to occur during solar maxima. Now, the current H1N1 virus may be being manipulated, and, it's being manipulated at a time in which, if we go back centuries, we know that there's a tendency for pandemics to occur. And this is dating back to the early 1700s. So if there is an attempt in the H1N1 virus and the mandatory vaccination scheme, then it's truly diabolical, because people are working with historical data that shows that there's a tendency for pandemics to occur. Some of the research shows that geomagnetic storms cause different reactions, primarily in males. Women seem to experience less change in accordance with the sun's behavior. Men may become increasingly irritable and aggressive. Either that or they become more creative. So there's a definite choice to be made there. But this brings us to the index of human excitability, which was developed by a Soviet professor, and he traced the incidence of wars, revolutions, riots, expeditions, and migrations from 500 BC to 1922 AD. And what he shows is that he divided them into 4 periods and showed that in period 2 and 3, which correspond to 2010 to 11, and it's coming up in this next year, and 2012 to 2014, there is, to take the maximum, in 2012 to 2014, it's the maximum excitability, the election of liberals or radicals, mass demonstrations, riots, revolutions, war, and the resolution of most pressing demands. So that's what has occurred historically during the solar maxima. Now, there is, and we don't have time to get into it today, but we do have another PowerPoint which shows the effect of a space-based weapon of mass destruction known as HARP, which you may have heard of, and it's demonstrated mood and mind control abilities. So we don't know. HARP is another variable which may be offsetting the effects of the index of human mass excitability and the effects of solar during the solar maximum of sunspots, in that HARP can render entire populations extremely apathetic and confused. And there's deep evidence that that is occurring. And one reason, we may have intersecting variables here, that one reason why our body politic is so apathetic sources from systematic mind control through technologies such as HARP. But it's also related to the sunspot cycles in that we're in a deep solar minimum now. I mean, there's all these outrages happening, and the human population seems relatively apathetic to, begin to move around it. What this data is very hopeful, because if we have a rapid swing in sunspots over the next few years, it'll be hopefully not the time for wars, but the time for social breakthroughs. And this brings us to several possible visions that we can have of solar cycle 24, 2009 to 2020. The disintegration vision is global and regional wars, the Armageddon meme, and this is a meme employed by the permanent war economy, whose business it is to promote war as an industrial activity, and to keep us organized around war within the dialectic of enemies, and to have all of our productive capacity and our mental capacity and our emotional capacity, our fears, directed toward war, which is an industrial activity like making shoes. The collapse of the world energy grid, which we've talked about from solar flares, the collapse of this global financial system, which George talked about earlier today, the collapse of nation states. One example, prominent example, is that of the US, and there's a meme now to deconstruct the US as a nation. I should say that back in the mid-70s, when I was a futurist at Stanford Research Institute, that was being actively studied there. And so that is the breakup of the US into about 5 or 6 region nations. And so in my mind, there's a question as to whether that's an attempted social engineering to deconstruct what one of the advanced democracies that could be a positive force. Ecological collapse. We've heard about the world's oceans, the ozone layer, etc. Pandemics, those that are engineered and those that occur normally because of our relationship to solar activity, which may make extraplanetary interventions from causing those. Earth changes, vast earth changes in terms of earthquakes, the migration of planets, the moving of the tectonic plate systems. Is this the outcome of solar cycle 24, where there's an alternative vision? It's kind of the glass half empty and the glass half full, or rose-colored glasses, and that is peaceful conflict resolution. What if human consciousness is shifting during this period such that the permanent war economy cannot manipulate us into war, and instead our political systems move to peaceful conflict resolution as a modality? The emergence of new forms of world public order, which are positive, not kind of the New World Order of the Third to Fourth Reich variety. The emergence of money as a public utility. Right now, money is actually the private property of a very small group of people. The dollar bills, the US dollar until now has been the reserve currency for the world. But the dollar bills that you have in your pocket are actually the property of the Federal Reserve Bank. You only have a temporary license to use them. And the Federal Reserve Bank, according to a 1976 US Senate subcommittee study, which we have online, just Google 9/11 War Crimes Tribunal, the Federal Reserve Bank is actually beneficially owned by one family, and that's the Rothschild family, which is headquartered in London and France. So, and these are, you know, this is a very grounded study which was done of the ownership of the banks that in turn own the Federal Reserve System. So we have one family that owns all of the currency in the world, and the currency itself is private property of that family. Well, in fact, money should be a public utility like electricity or like water, and with public central banks then, if you wanted to start a business, well, the bank would just provide money to you in the same way that it provides electricity to your workshop, and water to and public transportation. So there's a whole transformation that can happen with regard to money. Ecological energy. Right now, the black budget economy runs on the basis of teleportation. And that's a very efficient transportation mechanism. We've built these concrete roads, which takes away all of the green space. Cities are designed around the automobile. And we're using explosions and polluting fossil fuel to move these hunks of steel, heavy hunks of steel, to transport maybe one or two persons. Well, teleportation is an actual mechanism now. And if you go to examiner.com, I've got a column there. Just enter my name in the search, Alfred Webre. And this past week, we released an article which is now the #1 political examiner article in the USA. It's at the top. It's being read more than any political examiner article in the US, and that is where 2 whistleblowers have now come forth and confirmed that they have teleported from Earth to Mars and met with Martian extraterrestrials. Both of those whistleblowers are affiliated with Project Camelot. Arthur Newman, who has been using a name to protect himself up until now, Henry Deacon, and Andrew Bishago, who's a colleague of mine in the Mars Anomaly Research Society. So we now have definite proof and whistleblowers, very high level of evidence that teleportation is being employed in the national security state. And that could revolutionize our entire society and will revolutionize our society. I think I can share this because Andrew, my colleague, has now shared it. He was enrolled as a child participant in a DARPA time travel program by the US, which the US, we know definitively now, has had time travel, the ability to time travel either by chronovisors, kind of a television or a three-dimensional hologram that looks at forward and past scenes, and via actual teleportation devices. And Andrew has been to the year 2045, and it's a beautiful Earth. There's a lot of greenery, and the cities are all kind of ecological, and they're concentrated. So we have a peaceful future, say about 30 or 40 years from now, and it's just this transition that we're going through. So there have been people that have been to the future on a physical basis for the United States government, bringing back information from the future to the past to help it plan, to help humanity plan for the future, and it's quite positive. So it's important to stay focused on the fact that we're going toward a positive future, because that way we create it. Now, what we'll be seeing also is that our very DNA, as we speak, is being transformed by cosmic forces, by the galactic center black hole, which is acting as sort of a gigantic laser beam to transform our DNA to be able to handle a multidimensional future in which we are once again interacting with the rest of organized society in the universe, and to also bring us into an era of non-dualistic consciousness. And these are some of the changes that will be occurring, that we're living through now, and will be occurring during solar cycle 24 on an intense basis from 2009 to 2020. So these can be the outcomes of solar cycle 24, a transformation vision rather than a disintegration vision. And it depends where one wants to put one energy and what sort of holistic vision one wants to maintain. Now, we should also talk about the fact that we're going through the plane of the galactic center black hole. If we look at our Milky Way galaxy, it looks kind of like a plant, kind of like a pancake with a galactic center black hole at the center. It's about 100,000 light years across. There are about 200 to 400 billion star systems in it. And at the center of the galaxy is a massive black hole, about 4 million times the density of our sun. And that black hole spins around once every 11 minutes, as opposed to our Earth, which spins around once every 24 hours. And our sun, which revolves about once a month. So the galactic center black hole, and now science has confirmed that every galaxy most galaxies have a black hole at their center. It's like the engine of the galaxy, which at the physical level is creating the stars and various other celestial matter. And at other dimensional levels is creating life and consciousness. DNA is being affected by the galactic center black hole and our very consciousness. We tend to think that, again, our thoughts are our own. There are our thoughts, our individual little radio receptor brains and minds are picking up a vast field, morphogenic field that is being broadcast by the galactic center black hole and indeed by the universal axis at once to all. This is another view of the Milky Way galaxy. You can see how it's a pancake with a galactic center black hole at the center. Now, the plane of our, if this is galactic center black hole, the plane of our solar system is now passing through this, the plane of the galactic center black hole. It's a 36-year journey. It started in 1980 and will go to 2016. So we're going through the plane of the galactic center black hole right now. And this galactic alignment occurs about once every 12,800 years. And that's another schematic which shows how the plane is going through. It takes about 36 years now. There may be Earth changes during this time. Some of the theories of the Earth changes are interesting. One is a galactic superwave theory, and that is that looking at the galaxy as an enormous volcano, and the galactic center is sort of the center, and galactic bursts occur, which are sent out in a superwave fashion, taking debris and material throughout the galaxy. Another source of possible Earth changes would be celestial bodies entering the solar system, like what occurred in 9500 BC, which is when a portion, fragments of this Vela supernova entered the solar system and apparently collided with Mars, which was then an active, verdant planet with a common human society with our Earth, and destroyed the ecology of Mars, so that now it's a very fragile ecology with an intelligent, the survivors are an intelligent human civilization living under the surface of Mars. And this hit Earth also and destroyed our great maritime civilization, which Plato called Atlantis, which was the last world. So we humans have gone through a very severe trauma in the last 11,500 years with the 9500 BC solar system catastrophe. And what writer Barbara Hand Clouse says is that one of the reasons why we have such genetic and embedded fear of impending catastrophe is we have catastrophobia, and it's the memory of the 9500 BC solar system catastrophe. That is, our future is going to be relatively stable. It's our collective psyche which is unstable. The galactic center black hole may have energy bursts which may change or flip or wobble the Earth. These are the possible sources. But again, we have to look at it within the lens of catastrophobia. One researcher has codified a time acceleration matrix for the galactic alignment, and that is the concept that time is really accelerating. We're in the space-time dimension, and the dimension of time is accelerating. Oh my God, it's Saturday again, you know. How did that happen? And what he says is that we're coming into a period of human enlightenment, the disappearance of national borders, divinely guided anarchy, and the strengthening of the East. So, you know, this is part of the thing that's occurring. We're also going through a photon band, which may be a force to increase our consciousness. And as we just mentioned, the rate of change is accelerating. And that is that there will be 20 times as much change and transformation in the period February to December 2011 as there was during the period 1999 to January 2011. So 20 times as much change in that single year as between 1999, when the internet really started in full swing, to 2011. So we're in this time acceleration matrix. So exopolitics is as a science and as a science of relations between our human civilization and other intelligent civilizations in the universe, provides a framework of interface by which our civilization can begin to, on the societal basis, can begin to interface with other extraterrestrial and interdimensional civilizations. And one can say, when positing the future, that the degree of conscious interaction and cooperation amongst human society and advanced ethical extraterrestrial civilizations will be a determining factor in a positive human future. So right now, there appear by the evidence to be a long-standing strategic relationship between the Martian civilization and the human civilization, at least in terms of US bases on Mars and Martians in the openly working in Hughes aircraft, as we have witnesses of that. My colleague Andrew Basiago in 1971, in the company of his father, who was a CIA contractor, met 3 Martian astronauts at Curtiss Wright Field in New Jersey, who were visiting on a liaison mission. And, you know, so that and so our task now is to make all of that which is occurring in the covert world, in the subconscious as it were, to bring it into public light. And that's part of the survival mechanism. And exopolitics is the conceptual structure that makes that possible. In fact, we can say that exopolitics may function as the new survival science for humanity. And here we have, for example, a crop circle pattern that seems to be the same spiral pattern as our Milky Way galaxy, suggesting that many of these concepts are being played for us in a multidimensional way. This is the time acceleration matrix for galactic alignment. Dr. Carl Johan Kalaman and Barbara Han Clow have developed this, and it begins to show, by going through various eras of human history, how time accelerates. And for each of these periods, there are 20 times as much change in the next period. For example, in the national period, from 3000 BC to 1755 AD, well, in the next period, starting just before the French Revolution, the American Revolution, etc., up to the beginning of the internet, well, in the planetary period, there's 20 times as much change as it was during the national. And then when we go to the galactic period, from 1999 to February 2011, that's when all of these thoughts of the galaxy start coming, humanity goes galactic. And we have all this interest in Battlestar Galactica. Everyone becomes interested in extraterrestrial issues on a planetary basis. Well, that's all coming from the galactic center black hole and from the emanations at the universal level. And there's 20 times as much change there as there was during the planetary period in terms of bringing us up to a frequency and level, knowledge and information and cognitive basis to be able to participate as citizens of a multidimensional, highly organized and populated universe. And that's just the prelude to the universal era, which starts at the beginning of 2011. In terms of the broadcast, now, some people may be right on the broadcast. You know, we each interpreted according to our individual transducers, which are in our brains and in our minds and in our extended bodies. If we look at what the Mayan calendar is, then is really a mind map. It's not a calendar where you want to keep time. It's a mind map because it maps what sorts of things humanity is going to have on its mind at any particular time. And 2011 and 2012 is just the start of the universal era on Earth. That's when those are the signals that are being broadcast from the galactic center black hole, which the Mayans called Unabku. Now, if we just look, for example, at the galactic period, and which started in 1999, that's when the center of the galaxy started broadcasting the galactic sense. Well, if we look at the year 1999, that's when the first book, Exopolitics, was written. Because that's what's happening. Those are the signals being broadcast by the galaxy. And so all of this is kind of coming out in a matrix way. I have just a few copies of this that I managed to smuggle through U.S. Customs down to here for those who like to buy it. Not smuggle. You can't bring books through the aircraft, but I just said that they were pamphlets. So there you go. Then we had the first first scholarly conference on exopolitics in the year 2000. In other words, and we had other scholars come in. By the year 2003, that's when the first nation state, Mexico, began to disclose its UFO extraterrestrial files in earnest. In 2004 and 2005, that's when Brazil, Peru, and Chile began to disclose. The former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada Paul Hellyer gave a speech then in which he said, oh, UFOs are as real as the airplanes over your head, and the US government is planning to try to start an intergalactic war. So we have to do something about it. In beginning of 2006, the Associated Press reported that exopolitics had been nominated for Word of the Year of 2005. So we begin to get into the culture. These memes begin to get into the culture, these survival memes. In 2007, we had the Chicago O'Hare sighting. France and the United Kingdom disclose their UFO files. We had the former governor of Arizona say that, yes, the spacecraft, which was 2 miles, a mile on a side, which flew over Phoenix, Arizona on March 13, 1997, was an extraterrestrial spacecraft. And I'm sorry I did what I did and try to cover it up. That happened in 2006 and the beginning of 2007. And we could go into the Chicago O'Hare sighting. It was very interesting. Just to make it brief, a 60-foot UFO came down at United Gate C-17 in Chicago O'Hare Airport. I've been to that gate. And about 4 in the afternoon, it was witnessed by the plane, the ground crew, the tower, the FAA got involved, and it was all on all of the major media. And it came down there on November 7th, 2006. And there's a theory called, which we wrote about 20 years ago, called the context communication theory of extraterrestrial communications, which is that all UFOs are like dreams. They're communication from a higher intelligent source. They're like a dream is a communication from your subconscious to your conscious. Well, November 7th, 2006, what day was that? That was the US midterm election at which the neocons lost control of both houses of Congress. And I was a civil liberties lawyer, you know, working in that field also. And, you know, a police state was about to take over in the US. And in fact, with that sighting on midterm election day was when the shift happened in both houses of Congress. With the election then in 2008, which also brought about the collapse of the old financial structure during what's called the fifth night of the galactic underworld. In other words, all the collapse of the economic structure is because things that are hierarchical and are based on control and are not sustainable are being all collapsed now because that's the programming come out from the galactic center black hole. So it's all happening according to a large schedule. Now, we're currently in the 6th day from November 08 to November 09 of the galactic underworld. And what happened on December 12th, 2008? That's when the discovery of life on Mars happened in the NASA photographs of the NASA rover Spirit, which is on the surface of Mars, which photographed humanoids, animals, structures on Mars. And you can go to exopolitics.com and see scientific papers and over 40 documents. They're all free to download. So all of this is what's happening according to the drivers behind the universe at the galactic level and at the universe level. So it's all good. So that we can look forward to more disclosure. We can look forward to more positive things occurring as the old structures collapse. The thing is not to identify and suffer for the old structures. Now, what are some of the positive outcomes? Well, Spottiswoode, and here I want to acknowledge the research and insights of David Wilcock, who has provided a lot of the energy and insights for looking at how these processes are resulting in a positive future. For example, Spottiswoode, a psychologist, researcher from Palo Alto, California, each day, at that time of the day when we're most aligned with the galactic center, and you can see the spike on the graph there, our psychic ability increases 400%. So the more we are aligned with the galactic center black hole and the galactic center and the universe axis, the more psychic we are, the more we are in change. And I've done meditation exercises where I meditate on the galactic center. I mean, you know, that's where it's coming from. And as David Wilcock has said, the energy of the galaxy is directly tied in with the evolution of the human species by raising its level of consciousness. This is coming with a certainty as the streams flow. Now, the mechanism is one of the mechanisms is DNA activation. And Peter Gurayev, scientist Dr. Peter Gurayev, was able to transform a frog embryo into a salamander by shining a laser through the salamander embryo and redirecting it into the frog embryo, and the frog DNA transformed into a salamander. At the galactic level, that's what's occurring now. The galactic center black hole is the analog to the laser, and we're being transformed at the DNA level. So the more that we open ourselves up to that, the easier nature can take its course. The galactic centers contain the pattern to transform all DNA on the planet, and they provide a sufficiently large source of energy to enable the transformation to take place. That's David Wilcock expressing that realization. It's even occurring at the galactic level, and if we look at that, that looks like a two-strand DNA, correct? Well, if we look at that, it's the DNA nebula, which is 80 light years long and 300 light years from the galactic center black hole. And this is the first time that the DNA double helix, commonly seen inside living organisms, has been observed in the cosmos. In other words, our galaxy is a living organism. So these changes are happening at the galactic level, and we can take what's called a transposition burst, is a plausible mechanism by which the galactic bursts can activate our DNA, which is proved in the Gurayev experiment with the laser. So now we have a model for this. Kelleher calls the outcome of this product a light body, which is what's been described as the dimensional existence of the upper dimensional ethical extraterrestrials. We're in more and more refined energy bodies. So what is the boundary? 2011, 2013, 2012. These are boundaries in which these mechanisms of transposition bursts from the galactic center are happening, and they're happening now. Dr. John J. Harper talks about that our 97% of our DNA is now considered junk DNA, and it's that DNA which is being activated. So we're receiving an upgrade from the inside. Humans version 2.0. Endogenous DMT produced in our brains could also bring about what some people call a collective near-death experience that may occur. These are some of the factors that may occur. We'll have a collective near-death experience and really go up into our light bodies, our extended bodies as a species. That would be an interesting one. So endogenous DMT can be posited as a purveyor of the transformed consciousness. Oh, sorry. I didn't know how much time I had.
Sorry for this. Bill? Okay, I'm very sorry. We are at a little past 12:30. There's not any more time to go in any further into this. What we can do is, Alfred, you will make your presentation perhaps available to people?
Yeah.
So that they can follow up on the final pages?
Sure.
I'm not sure how far we are along.
Yeah.
I would
Sure.
suggest that what we do.
No,
we give Alfred
we're almost at the end. This is slide 53
Okay, yeah.
of about 60 slides, so the bulk of the information has been transmitted, and of the insight.
Okay, we would be glad to give Alfred a couple of minutes to actually sum up the presentation, if you'd like to do so.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that we are coming into, and we are in, an era of tremendous opportunity, which is occurring regardless of our individual thoughts. So it makes good sense, if one is in resistance, to change one's thoughts and to really tune into what's occurring at the galactic and universal levels, which is part of a universe program to allow us to come into the universal age, which we know by people who have gone to the future physically and come back, is going to be on our planet within, by the year 2045 or 2050, which is just 40 years away. So it's a positive future that's coming. And I'll be here, I'll be in the back. I brought some copies of the book Exopolitics, which founded this whole field, and and if you want more information, please stay tuned to exopolitics.com. Thank you.
There's some fascinating areas that could be investigated further that he's been touching on, and some of that information is available from our whistleblowers on Camelot. And we have another recent interview that talks about the galactic super wave. Paul LaViolette is the scientist responsible for that concept, and he's done a lot of investigation. We visited him in Greece and did a recent interview. We have yet to edit it. We've been so busy. But I just wanted to let you know that that is the area that some of which Alfred was referring to. And of course, we're having a presentation by David Wilcock tomorrow, the last presentation of the day for 2 hours. And so certainly you'll be getting more of that from him as well. In the meantime, we're going to lunch now. It's a little past 12:30. We have a major announcement before you leave the room. And I'm going to let Bill put it in his words first.
I'm going to make a minor announcement. This isn't working. Can you hear me? I felt that. Minor announcement first.
with apologies, there is a motorcycle and a white truck parked outside of the hotel that need to be moved or they will be towed, so we have been told. We've been asked to make this announcement. Okay.
Thank you.
That's the minor announcement,
Yeah, I really appreciate
unless you're the
Thank
owner of
you.
those vehicles, in which case it might be major. The other thing I want to share with you is that we have just had a phone call from Mr. Alex Collier. And Alex Collier has told us that it's all right for us now to release the information that he will be speaking here tomorrow.
Excitability, which has been plotted by a Russian scientist going back to 500 BC. And what he's plotted is that about 80% of the revolutions, the wars, and the breakthroughs in human society at the collective level happen at the solar maximum. So,
Okay, you're online here, and let's make sure that you know how to use this computer.
oh good.
I guess you got a down arrow. Does that work? No?
Yeah, probably, let's see. Oh wait, I've got to get on,
Oh, yeah, the down arrow is working. It was
Oh,
just
is it?
slow.
Oh, sorry.
So let's go back up.
Let's see.
Is that? No, that's not it.
Okay, good.
There we are at the
Great.
beginning. So this is up, down arrows right there.
Okay,
That will work.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. Well, as we were saying, this presentation, and there are about 60 slides here, so I'll tend to go through them on a relatively quick basis. Following the trend from 2009 to 2020, and we'll be going kind of on a macrocosmic scale on much of this. That's a picture of our own galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and we'll also be getting into the axis of which is a galactic center black hole at the center of our galaxy. And now it turns out that science is discovering, as you might have suspected, a universal axis. Not only a galactic axis, but a universal axis. So the synchrony that we're going through now is occurring not only at the individual level, at the planetary level, at the solar level, at the galactic level, but at the universal level. So it's not only just us here, it's huge. And the universe is really the source of our thoughts. We think that we have private thoughts, but it's coming at the galactic level and at the universal level. So one message for that is relax and enjoy it. Now, let's see if oh good. We'll be covering Solar Cycle 24, which is a perfect storm, the galactic alignment, exopolitics, and the time acceleration matrix. Time is actually accelerating as we speak, as we sit here, and because time is not a constant. And exopolitics is the new political science of outer space. It's a science of relations between our human civilization and other civilizations in the multiverse. We'll be talking about positive outcomes of Solar Cycle 24 and strategies and solutions. So, well, welcome to Solar Cycle 24. Yeah, well, thank you very, very much, Carrie. And I want to thank Project Camelot, who are really providing, I think, in my humble opinion, a leading edge, if not the leading edge platform for whistleblowers to come forth on the issues that will create a positive future for us. And on that note, that's the note that I'll be sharing with you in a PowerPoint on Solar Cycle 24. And Solar Cycle 24 is the one that's just starting now, where it's 2009 to 2020. And by 2020, we'll be roughly into the beginnings of a golden age. So I know that it's very hard to go from the problem statement to a golden age, but that's roughly the process that we're in now. If we look at Solar Cycle 24, which we'll be seeing all the graphs and pictures of.
This is working. We're very close now.
Yeah. The solar maximum will be in 2012 to 2013, specifically some say in May of 2013. What that means, and we'll share some of this, is that there's the index of human
Alfred Webre is the originator of the term exopolitics, for those of you that don't know that. And he's actually a futurist. He's an amazing thinker. He was in this field doing things and thinking things before most people had any idea, even in ufology, how to really think about this whole concept that we are not alone in the universe. And so I just want to give kudos to him and really honor him for that. He's also been, how do I put this? He's undergone heavy-duty surveillance and other kinds of things. He is Canadian, but obviously he was on the target list for the powers that be for quite a long time. And actually he's had to weather all kinds of stuff that he doesn't even talk about. I know this because of my intuitive ability, but also because I followed his work actually long before Camelot.
Yeah, sure.
So I just want to really honor him for that. Other than that, I think that we could just give him maybe the microphone and let him
Sure.
begin to talk about, because he's very knowledgeable in so many ways. Are you hooked up here with this? Does this?
Yes. Am I? Oh, great. Okay. 2009 to 2020. There are many predictions of what the amplitude of Solar Cycle 24 will be. As you can see from this graph by NASA. And some think that it's going to be very low amplitude, and some think that it's going to be very high amplitude. So we're in a position of maximal uncertainty now. And although some information about Solar Cycle 25 is coming in, most of the predictions are only within this cycle, that is from 2009 to 2020. And so I like focusing, amongst many other reasons, on Solar Cycle 24, 2009 to 2020, because it gets us out of the 2012 mean. And it says, hey, it's a cycle. Okay. Oops, I guess that's going forward. Right now, we're in a deep solar minimum, and there's about a 50-year low in solar wind pressure. What this means is that there will be fewer geomagnetic storms that theoretically can affect all of the computer equipment and satellites and other things that we have here on Earth. We continue to be in a deep solar minimum, and the sun's brightness is dropping. We're in the deepest solar minimum in nearly a century.